think the most important thing is that, this happened many, many years ago, right? And you were very public about sharing your story. And I think that was so heroic that after what you had gone through, that you had healed enough to be able to go in front of others and talk about it and share about it. But here we are in 2021. And I mean, it is still very much the same kind of an issue.
Taboo. Well, Sharon, that's the other thing. And I'm glad we opened this talk on the spiritual part of it, because I made a deal with God. When I got my implants out, I just said to God, I prayed and I said, if you get me back to my previous health, get me healthy so that I can take care of my baby, I commit to sharing my story with whoever needs to hear it. And that has been a promise I have kept.
Hello, Thrive with Sharon podcast community. This is Sharon Land. I am a holistic psychotherapist licensed in the state of New Jersey, a metaphysician and a healer. And I have been so proud of the way that this community has grown. And today I have another incredible guest. Her name is Kathryn Gordon. And I would love to introduce you to her. You're going to love her. She has so much to say. But Kathryn is the best-selling author of Relationship Grit. And she co-authored that with her husband, Jon Gordon. And she is also a co-executive producer of The Tiger Rising and is getting ready to launch her own podcast called Kathryn For Real. And most importantly, I am so excited that I get to call her my friend. She has been such an incredible person to get to know. And I look forward to the fact that our journeys have intersected and we get to know each other more and more and more. So Kathryn, I want to give you a warm welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Sharon. I'm so happy to be here. And finally, we get to do this. It's 11/11, which is a big deal. And the fact that we're doing it on 11/11, and we've had some difficulties, but we've pushed through and we've done it again. It's 6:37 and we're making it happen.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh. It's such yeah. So it is, it's 11/11. And that this is the Lionsgate Portal, basically. So we are literally in a portal, which I think is a great way to segue into our discussion, because I really do feel as though we're straddling two different timelines right now, right? And we're really at this amazing opening to this resurgence. And I really, in reading your Relationship Grit book, one of the things that I loved and I identify with myself is the fact that you are very much God-focused, universe and source focused, very spiritual, but at the same time, you're not tied to any kind of like dogmatic religion or any have-tos or rules or whatever it might be, right? So like the fact that all of those things kind of weave themselves together into this wonderful place where you and I can have this conversation and talk about things from a position of our highest selves, of our best selves, and that we can also talk about some really real things that have helped you to get to where you are now. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Really, really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, my journey, my soul journey has been really beautiful, I think. In my 20s, I was in a group of women. We had all types. We had the Christian healer, and we had people who believed in, some of them even believed in extraterrestrials. Professors at universities. We had some plastic surgeon. It was a really amazing mix of people. And we were led by a woman who was an Ashkenazi Jew but she was like, could do automatic writing. She was amazing. She was the most amazing healer. And at 25 years old, I was the youngest one in the group by far. I learned just so much about, life and about the spiritual realm, and that there's so many beautiful things and meanings and symbols, kind of like 11:11. And actually, I do have to say, when I met my husband, because 11 became my favorite number, and when I kind of exposed Jon to that, he and I connected on those spiritual truths, and then really were seekers together early on. And he wrote when he wrote his first book, Energy Bus, the bus was number 11. And of course, it's gone on to be a huge bestseller and, all of that. But yeah, so 11 has a lot of meaning for us. And, but yeah, I'm really grateful. I had such an amazing group of spiritual women. I studied Kabbalah, I studied Buddhism. Fast forward, my husband ended up becoming a Christian. And, I kind of, although I was born Christian, born Catholic, I'd say, it wasn't like I practiced, but I've been able to learn a lot about the Christian faith from him in a whole new light, but I definitely always, I love the woo woo, if you want to call it that. And it's funny because, and I just connected with this Christian astrologer.
Ooh.
And he did my chart and it blew me away. I'm going to have to connect you with him because I'm going to have him on my podcast. And my husband was kind of like, yeah, okay, let's see about this. And we ended up going to a dinner last weekend, and they connected. And the whole night we were in this big table, and everybody was sitting across listening to these two guys. And the conversation was amazing. So yes, it's so neat to be able to talk on that level, on different levels, I guess, to be able to go there. Because I think there's a lot of meaning in all of it, really.
There is. And I think that the one thing is that it really brings us to faith and trust, right? And when we talk about faith and trust, we're talking about things that we don't necessarily know in a very 3D and concrete way. It's really more a knowing, right? And so when you allow those conversations to guide you, and you literally can feel on a physical level and also on a soul level, this acknowledgement of right. And it's really interesting because I had that experience when we met in person, when you and I were talking, I think we started talking about the fact that, I don't know who brought it up first, but we have in common that we experience celiac. Right.
Right.
And, so I didn't know until much later on in my life that I had celiac, and I had undiagnosed celiac for a long, long time, but it was
probably important. Let's tell the listeners what celiac is. I think most people know, but just in case. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an autoimmune disease of your intestinal tract. You are allergic to gluten, which would be surprising that it's in a lot of things you don't realize. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and the way that it showed up for both of us, which I think was the piece for me where I just got that, like, that God acknowledgement,
Yeah.
Right. And because both of us, the way that it manifested wasn't the typical way that it manifests, in that, doctors were looking for the signs, so ours really truly did show up as a autoimmune issue, in the sense of like flu-like symptoms, and it didn't affect our digestive tract the same way that it typically, at that point, 80% or 90% of people who were diagnosed had presented with. And at that time, at least for me, it was before gluten-free was even a thing. Right. But the thing that I think, after reading the book, the thing that I think wove its way in was the same I had that experience, and I've had that experience when it came to Western medicine in general, with a lot of my autoimmune issues and a lot of other things that I had experienced, where I kept going back and I kept going back, and I knew that I didn't feel well, and I had this knowing, and I was doing the right thing, looking for acknowledgement. And basically all I was told is, well, you're too weak, or there's something, it's all in your head. You just need to work with your mind more, or whatever. Right. And the thing that just stopped me in my tracks when I read in your book, Relationship Grit, was the fact that you also, not just with celiac disease, but also with an incident with your breast implants, had experienced a very similar thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to pull that apart a little bit and unpack that, because one of the things that I know is it's one of the most challenging things to be dealing with something, but it's even more challenging when you don't feel heard and you don't feel understood.
Yeah. I was told I was crazy. I was told I had postpartum depression. I was told I had fibromyalgia. And so the quick backstory is that, I had these implants and got pregnant with my daughter, and they said I could breastfeed fine. So I had my daughter and I started to breastfeed, and she ended up getting thrush. I got mastitis and thrush also. And so I had to wean her. So that was at week 3. And that wasn't the end of it. It actually was just the beginning, because in the next 10 months, I got sicker and sicker and sicker. I had chills up and down my spine. I had achy, hot, burning joints from my hands down to my feet. My feet would burn like on fire. I would kept pulling muscles. My heart was beating really fast, and I was really scratchy. Like, it's hard to explain, but felt like it was in my lungs. And so sometimes I would actually even have to beat my chest to try and itch my lungs. Then I ended up developing this weird rash on my chest, and it was almost like something was coming out of my chest. Ooh. So all these things were happening. I'm going to the doctor. My husband was in law school at the time. I have this little baby, and I would cry. I would break down crying. Please, Jon, just watch the baby. I have to go to the doctor. I went to every doctor you can think of, from a neurologist to a rheumatologist. I had, the whole pinpricks in my nerves. I mean, I did every test you can imagine. I did chest x-rays, and nothing was coming up. But intuitively, the intuition, I knew there was something wrong with me. They kept giving me prescriptions for OxyContin. So at the time, OxyContin was like the new drug du jour, and that was going to be the answer to everything. And, Sharon, I knew that there was something wrong, and that if I started taking these drugs, I was never going to find out if I even lived, because I think, it was going to go really south. Yeah. And so I didn't, but I held on to the bottles. And finally, after the last doctor, and I have to tell you, I had doctors shame me. I had them, pat me on my knee and say, whatever you think. And I did bring up my implants several times, and they would say, oh, they're saline. Saline's just like the water, the fluid in your body. You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. So one night I had had enough, and me and my husband were fighting so bad, and he didn't understand it all. And he does feel bad about that now. I mean, it was a really hard time in our life, and we do talk about that in the book. He was just not nice and wasn't helpful to me at all. And, he says now, of course, because he thought it really was in my head. And so, but I'd finally lost hope. It was weird. It was a feeling. I'll never forget it, because I always had this like excitement for life, and this, zest for life, and this, I always had hope. That's why I think I tried to pinpoint what that feeling was that I lost. And I think it was hope. I lost hope in my life.
Wow.
And I went to bed that night and I prayed to God and I said, God, every time I tell this story, by the way, I start crying. Please forgive me for what I'm going to do. I know that my husband and my mother-in-law will take care of my baby, but I can't go on. And I was going to take all the bottles of OxyContin in the morning when Jon left for law school. Well, that night, speaking of spiritual things, had a dream. And this voice was as loud as anything I've ever heard in my life. And it said, your implants are making you sick. You need to get them out. And I mean, it was like a boom. And I woke up in the morning and I knew it. Like I knew it was God.
Yeah.
I knew it was God. And I rolled over to my husband and I told him what happened and about the dream. And he looked at me for the first time in, 10 months. And he said, I believe you. I will second mortgage our home to get my wife back. I'd love to say that that's when things completely changed and he became an amazing husband and everything was right with the world, but it wasn't. He definitely was not a very happy man. And it was a journey I went on by myself. He wouldn't take me to the hospital. He didn't pick me up from the hospital. It was a whole thing there. And again, I'm still married to him. We've been married 25 years and married 24, together 26. And believe me, like he says, he pays for it all the time. And, I mean, he is such an amazing man now. And people have asked me before, like, wow, you really put yourself out there and really, showed Jon in a different light in your book. And, he wanted to do that. He thought it was really important to share that story because there are probably so many, which we found out since then, we get so many emails that other couples are struggling with something like that. Maybe it's not breast implants, but maybe one of them is ill, or something's going on. And, if you're not acting really great, you need to change. You need to figure some things out for yourself. But anyway, I did end up calling my one friend who was a plastic surgeon in my spiritual meditation group.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I said, Susan, Dr. Susan Kolb. I said, Susan, I need to come in. I need to figure out what's going on. I went in and she said, it sounds like your left implant is infected. Let's open you up, clean your implants back out and put some back in. Now, what you have to remember is when I got my implants done, they told me my implants were forever. Like they were forever.
Right.
Well, little did I know that, now they say 10 years you replace them. So she couldn't get me in. This was the bad part, is she could not fit me in as much as she wanted to it was like 3.5 weeks. And at that point, Sharon, I could barely lift my head. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but I had a systemic infection and a systemic fungal infection and a systemic bacterial infection. So I would slur my words. I would talk and it was attacking my brain. As well as all my organs. Yeah, it was really bad. And I thought to myself when we walked out, I thought, I'm going to die. Like, I'm going to die. And do you know, she came running to the car just before we pulled away. And she said, somebody just canceled. Can you be here at 7:30 tomorrow morning? And I was there. I mean, we had to jump through some hoops for some blood work or something. And I was there. Well, what she wasn't prepared for was when she opened me up, my implants were black. They were black and filled with a fungus. You could see them. And if you Google my name, Kathryn Gordon and breast implants, a lot of my stories will come up. I've done a lot of shows, a lot of documentaries. Montel Williams back in the day, for those that remember him back then.
Yeah, of course I do.
MTV. Yeah, I did. But yeah, so she wasn't prepared for that. She videotaped it. And so she took the implants out and I had told her, when you take these implants out, do not put any back in. I was done. That was before the surgery and before I even knew that the implants were black. So she did sew me up. I was really, really sick after that. It took about 2 months to get, because my, fungal infection and all that. But
Yeah.
thank gosh. I feel like I am healthy today. I, certainly have some little autoimmune things like the celiac, which I probably would have had anyway.
Hmm.
But they say if you have markers for different things and you have something very traumatic, it can trip it off. So,
Yes.
yeah, it is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, that's my implant story.
I just have to say that I think it's so important because, this was time wise. What year was this? This was 20.
Yeah. So this is the thing. And this was, nobody knew about this back then.
Yeah.
So, I got my implants in 1989. I got my implants out in 1999. And I'm telling you, back then, it's not that women weren't getting sick, because they were, and there were groups, and the internet was just coming, and I had joined in on a couple groups. And very sadly, there was a woman that was actually in Atlanta. I was in Atlanta at the time, that I had connected with, and she had several kids, and her last 2 kids, she had gotten silicone implants and breastfed them, but apparently the silicone had gotten into their kids, and both of her children were very, very sick. And she got to the point she was fighting and fighting and fighting, and she ended up jumping off the parking deck of the mall. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was awful. She'd just given up. So I was really lucky that didn't happen with my daughter, Jade. She was fine. And I didn't have silicone. I had saline.
Mm-hmm.
Now the shell is silicone, which a lot of people don't know. It is silicone, but
Yeah.
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 So,
But I think the most important thing is that, this happened many, many years ago, right? And you were very public about sharing your story. And I think that was so heroic that after what you had gone through, that you had healed enough to be able to go in front of others and talk about it and share about it. But here we are in 2021. And I mean, it is still very much the same kind of an issue.
Taboo. Well, Sharon, that's the other thing. And I'm glad we opened this talk on the spiritual part of it, because I made a deal with God. When I got my implants out, I just said to God, I prayed and I said, if you get me back to my previous health, get me healthy so that I can take care of my baby, I commit to sharing my story with whoever needs to hear it. And that has been a promise I have kept. I used to get bombarded constantly for interviews and shows and things like that. It's definitely dwindled, which is fine, because so many other women are now coming out. So there's like a whole new generation.
Yes.
So, and here's my thing. I'm not anti-breast implant. I loved my breast implants. I loved the way I looked in clothes with my implants, but it's like anything else. You need to know the risks and pay attention to your body, because your body knows and your intuition knows.
Yes.
So that would be my thing for sure.
Yeah. And I think I first of all, our intuition, it's so important to differentiate between intuition and fear. Right. And realize that, fear usually makes a lot of sense. Intuition usually doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. And that's exactly true. Yeah.
Yeah. But then the other thing too is the fact that, you didn't have a whole camp around you, right? Supporting you, which is a shame, and it's traumatic. That in and of itself is traumatic, right? Yep. But your personality, your feisty, fiery personality, I think really was part of God's gift.
Thank goodness. Really. Absolutely. I And believe me, even for me, when I'd lost hope, I just thought, when people keep telling you you're crazy, you're postpartum, when I started to lose hope and health, I just had gotten to the point where I thought, but then that little teeny tiny part of me, so yes, I think definitely the fighter in me, is what kept me going for as long as I did, for sure. And kept me going in a lot of other things. If you've read my book, just with my
I know. I was just
relationship.
that's a perfect segue. I mean, that was one of the things that I just chuckled. I literally wrote on one of the pages, "You are my spirit animal." I swear to God, because I just love the fact that, in the very beginning of the book, Jon had remarked about how fiery you were, right?
Yeah.
And I think at one point you were telling this story that you went to a couples therapist. And so for those of you who haven't read the book, you must read the book Relationship Grit. Whether you are in a relationship or not, right? It is it's so relatable.
I've done my best relationship work when I was not in a relationship. So read the book.
Yeah.
And grit, I need to tell you this real quick before you tell the story. Grit is an acronym, and it stands for, G is for God. I think you have to bring God into your relationship, no matter what that looks like for you. Could be higher power. Resolve, you have to resolve to stick together. I mean, people think the grass is always greener, but most of the time it's not, although there are exceptions, of physical abuse and narcissistic behavior.
Right. Exactly. I wanted to make sure we throw in that caveat. And I love the fact, coming from the lens of being a therapist and mental health professional and healer, that you say many, many times in the book that, please make sure that you're not misreading that we're saying stay in and work through an abusive, toxic, unhealthy relationship.
That is very important. No. And that's why we did put that in several times, because I wanted to make that very clear. Yeah. Yeah. We're talking normal couple relational issues, not. Yeah. And then the I is for invest, which is you need to invest in your relationship. Think about it. We normally invest in our coworkers or, people outside of our relationship, and we kind of take our partner for granted a lot of times. I know I can be guilty of that as well. So investing. And then T is for together. You got to do it together. It takes two. It can't just be one person always wanting the relationship to work. So that's it about Relationship Grit. So I wanted to give you the acronym, but you were going to say something. Do you remember what you were going to say?
So you went to the therapist, and this was actually the second couples therapist that you had gone to, in the book. And, the first one actually was a bonding, experience for you, because she laughed at you and you weren't saying something funny.
No, I don't remember what it was, but she just cracked up like we were just stupid to be there.
Which, I mean, just yuck. But then the guy, it was a man, and he said, "Boy, you go from 0 to 60 like that."
Just like that.
And and I just thought, you know what? Like, I think that it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But it's definitely a nod to your fiery and feisty personality, which you had to have.
I had to have growing up. I grew up in an alcoholic family with a dad that was gone a lot traveling. And when he wasn't, it was very volatile in my home. I had 2 older brothers, one of them that used to beat the crap out of me on a regular basis. I lived in a neighborhood that was not, it was, so this is what I tell people, because, when I raised my daughter and she was bullied. So I grew up in a neighborhood where you fought. And I mean, I got to tell you, I fist fought up into high school. And people, when I tell them now, they go, "What?" Yes, we literally fought. I'm not saying it's a good thing, because it's not. I got to tell you what it did do. it just kind of, it's kind of different with when you're dealing with a lot of the catty emotional stuff. It's this long-term. Let me tell you something. When you're in a neighborhood and it's more about that, it is a one and done. Like it's a one and done. So that was the one thing. Of course, it's not okay. But when my daughter was being bullied in middle school, my husband, didn't come from the same background I did. And he was, and of course, he's also, speaker, motivational, positive, and he's feeding her all these, things to do with this girl and and nothing was working. And the last time my daughter went to this, it was a church group that she would go to after school. And these girls were so awful. And this one girl was bullying her all the time. And she would take her shoes and throw them in the lake and punch her in the stomach. She would punch her in the stomach. She would do all these things. And it was over the holidays. And my daughter went roller skating. And all of a sudden she had a broken arm. And I knew this girl had pushed her down. So fast forward, we come back from the holidays and my husband had done all this preaching about, positivity, all this stuff. And I'm like,
right.
Okay, girl, now you're going to do it the green runway. Come over here. I said, let me just tell you something. When she comes up to you, you are going to take that cast and you're going to knock her in the stomach as hard as you can. Do you understand me? And she was like, So she goes, no, lo and behold, the girl comes at her again and she hit her. I know that's horrible to say, but she came home and she goes, Mom, I could see that it really like she was hurt and she didn't bother me. And do you know that girl never bothered her for the rest of the year? So I know it's bad. It's pretty bad to tell you that, but that was kind of how I grew up. Like, it was like, it was kill or be killed, so to speak.
Right.
And, so I've certainly had to learn how to be in a relationship because, we don't talk about this too much in the book, a little bit maybe, but when we first started dating, when Jon would make me mad, I would fly across the room at him. I had boys. I mean, I had brothers, right? So like I would get mad and he would just kind of be like, whoa, the poor guy had to fight him, fend off. And so, it was one of those learnings. So it's a fiery personality. Yes. And I had to learn how to transmute that, if you want to say it like that, into something that was not physical violence.
Yes. Yeah. I really appreciate the fact that you said that because I think that, many people, especially when they grow up in a toxic environment, challenging environment, or whatever it may be. We make a choice of going left or right. I guess that's the best way to put it, right? And so you can choose to allow your chaotic environment to give you the excuse to have bad behavior. Or you can learn the playing field that you're in and figure out how is the best way that I can achieve the goal, which ultimately is to not be in this constant tussle of this aggression, right?
Yeah.
And it can be challenging for us to discern, but I think it's also real, right? So we're here to talk about real, which is some of us have grown up in really, really tough neighborhoods. Some of us have been in very traumatic upbringings, and being passive doesn't always work.
No.
Aggressive doesn't always work, but there's a way of doing something for effect, so that you can kind of knock things off. Now, that being said, because of what I read and what I know of your relationship with Jon, especially in the beginning, you guys were you were triggering all of these unhealed aspects that were within
everything,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of things were triggered. But I think that's what relationships are, right? It's two imperfect people. And how beautiful if you can get together and heal together.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And that's really the biggest point that I kept saying, gosh, I really want to make sure we get to this point, because what made it work is the fact that, yes, Was it terrible that, like Jon even said that he was selfish,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Was it terrible that you might have gotten really aggressive?
mhm.
Um, yeah, it was in a sense, right? Everything's perfect in its imperfections, but at the same time, it wasn't great. It wasn't ideal. It's not something you want to continue to repeat. But
Right.
what made it work is the fact that you were willing to listen to the other individual and hear what
Mhm,
they had to say at some point,
mhm.
maybe not right as soon as they wanted to say it, but
Right.
you held space, you created space, and you said, I want to keep showing up. I want to be committed to this. I want to change. It's
Mhm,
not, I want to be right. It's, I want to change.
mhm,
And that
mhm.
also goes right into the faith aspect because it's not about being the same person. We all have that moment, right? Some people, it was high school where they were like the star football player or the, cheerleader or whatever it might have been, or the actress or whatever it might be. And so they're just always looking to recreate that scenario, which means that they don't want to change, right?
Right.
They just
Right.
want to
Well, they're
find
living
the
in, or in a way, they're living in the past or in their comfort. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're trying to create a hologram or an
Mhm,
illusion of somebody and have this relationship with the illusion, and they get
mhm.
upset when that person doesn't live up to that illusion, right?
Right. Right.
Um, but really for you, what I noticed over and over and over and over again is that you had this level of humor and
Mhm,
humility that you
mhm,
allowed into your relationship where you said, okay, I'm going to rely on the fact that there is so much that I don't know,
mhm.
and I'm willing to step forward into that space, even though it's uncomfortable as heck and I have no idea. And between you placing yourselves in that situation and then also life placing you in those situations.
Mhm.
I mean, your breast implant story is one piece. There, were others where, he had lost his job and, on and on and on, right? That you continue to rely on the faith of something bigger and greater than the
Yes.
two of you, and that is what you allowed to yourselves to lean into more than anything else, which allowed you to change.
I love what you said. It's funny you pulled that out of there because that's exactly right. Humor and humility. And it definitely has carried me. And it's probably something I've used my whole life to get me through. But yeah, that's funny. You pulled that out. Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it's because I knew you. And so I could really, I mean, I even think, and I'm so excited that everybody here is now going to read the book, right? You're going to get the book,
Yeah.
everybody. But
Yay.
that that now they get to know a little bit more of your personality, because I could really hear your voice, and I really got your personality when I was reading it,
Mm.
a lot just from spending
That
time
was
with you.
that was the goal. Yeah, that was the goal. I wanted when people read, I wanted it to seem like I was sitting there telling them the story. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you,
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
get that.
And I haven't had the opportunity to really get to know Jon very much other than just, by proxy of through you. And I look forward to that. But,
Yes.
he's such an incredible human being and doing such
Mhm.
incredible work now
He
that it
really
was,
is.
uh, God, I mean, it gives me hope. It
Mhm.
gives me
Yeah.
hope. And
Yeah.
I love the fact that as a man, that he is really stepping forward in very assertive ways,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And I think that all of this beginning aspect of your relationship and him finding his way was a great way to flex his metaphysical muscle, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
get to where he is now. Um, but I just think it's so incredible. And it was such a risk because he's really seen failure and had a lot of ups and downs in his financial career, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
to publish a book like this
Mhm.
really people could read it the wrong way.
So it's funny when we wrote the book, we sent a draft to his brother, and his brother said, "Do not publish this book, Jon." you do not look good in this light. And he was like, no, the people need to know that they can change. They need to know they can change. They need to know this is where we came from and this is where we are. And it's a beautiful journey. It's been a hard journey, but it's been worth it. And so so this is funny. When I do encounter someone that's reading the book, my blinds guy out in LA, he's like, I'm reading your book and I'm on, because each chapter is the GRIT. He's like, I'm in chapter R. And he goes, I don't really like Jon right now. And I'm like, keep reading, just keep reading, because I think by the end, you're going to see, he turned it around. He did. And I mean, we have our days. I mean, he's still, oh my gosh. I mean, he's a great human being. And yeah, he has to tolerate me. The wild one. So no, it's all good. But you know what? You can transform your relationship. You can. And that's we're here to tell you that,
Yes.
You want it to work, it can. Again, as I said before, as long as there's not those other things that are involved, the abuse and
right. If it's unhealthy and if it's really taking away, and unhealthy can be for emotionally, physically, spiritually, I mean, any of the pillars of health, right?
Right.
We really have the opportunity to take a hard look at it. And if there isn't the change, then it's definitely something that we can create a choice for ourselves. And just as a real, quick little insert here, I will put down in the notes domestic violence hotline and,
That's
some
a good idea.
resources, just so that if people are like, wow, it's just kind of hitting them, the difference and the differentiation. There are resources and there are places that you can go for help. And that I also want to acknowledge the fact that, especially if you're in a physically threatening environment,
Yes,
that you have to take your time extracting yourself from there. So again, listen to your own intuition and surround yourself with a team of people that can support you and who aren't just hounding you to leave that person, but really someone who is going to trust you to find your own way safely out of a situation, because it's sometimes exiting a relationship is more dangerous than staying in the relationship. So we just have to be mindful of that as well. So I just wanted to insert that. So, the interesting thing too, that I pulled out of, a lot of what we've shared and what we've talked about in your book and just in general with, some of what you've shared of your personal life, is something that's very similar to what I think a lot of people have experienced in different levels of acculturation, right? Which is this survival. We're having to survive through situations, right? So like even your daughter had to survive dealing with the bully for however long she was,
Right.
You were at one point really surviving your relationship. We as a collective now are surviving. Some of us are surviving situations and circumstances. And yet I really truly believe that even when we are in a season of having to survive something, that we can really, like you said, transmute it into thriving, to really thrive, right?
Absolutely.
So I wanted to get your take on that. I always love the fact that everybody has a different take on it and a different perspective. I'd love to know yours on the idea of surviving and, what you think is going on in the world, or just in general, surviving
today or just in general,
and whatever you want.
Okay. Well, I mean, we probably don't want to go into today. Maybe we will, but I feel I'll make it personal. I feel now that everything that I went through in my life, and we didn't even talk about the guy that I lived with. I moved out of my parents' house I just turned 17. My dad tried to strangle me. That's a whole long story. And I moved in with my drug dealing, cocaine dealing boyfriend. And he was also abusive and, dealt with all that. So it was, dealing with him. I dated him for 5 years, left him, moved to Nashville. It's like all these things that you go through. I look back now and they made me who I am. I'm grateful for them. I mean, definitely there's some things I wish were different, but you got to look forward. You can't look back, and you can't be a victim. You have that victim mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to serve you. So what are you going to do with the cards you're dealt? And that's really how I've looked at things. Now, it's a very interesting thing because I grew up with 2 brothers and we all had the same childhood. And maybe in some ways I had a little bit different as I was the girl or, but pretty much we lived the same life, but they both interpret it differently. So it's interesting that the whole nature nurture thing, right? Nature nurture.
Yes. Well, what's really interesting is I don't know if you know Sir Michael Meade. He's an incredible spiritualist, and he has his own podcast too. So one of the things that he says, and I love, 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 love this, and he has a talk specifically on sibling relationships with the parents. And, he talks about it from a spiritual perspective. And what he says is that we are all souls that come here for our own unique journey, right? So even though your siblings are biologically your siblings, but from a spiritual perspective, we're all siblings, right? So, and so your brother, both of your brothers, and then yourself and whatever, you knew that this is who you needed to have as parents to help you with your own unique soul growth, which also in turn the wise one that knows that, everybody has their own energetic fingerprint. So you and I are going to have a different kind of relationship and chemistry than me and another person, right? The constant is me, but the variable is the other individual, right? So you're of course going to have a different relationship with your parents. Just because your parents are the same people, you're all different, right? That doesn't mean that you're good or bad. It just means that you are, right? But the interesting piece is that part of this journey that we all are on is this journey of we're here for independence and interdependence, right? But a funny thing happens along the way in our lifespan development that really creates codependence. It creates dependence. It creates all of these other things, right? And so part of what happens is this kind of wounding that occurs between the parent and the child. And as Sir Michael Meade says, the wound becomes the womb that births you into your real purpose.
Wow. Okay. That's beautiful.
Isn't it beautiful?
That's beautiful and true. Yeah.
It's true.
All right. I'm going to have to check him out. Dr. Michael Meade.
Sir Michael Meade. Yeah.
Sir Michael Meade.
He's got an incredible story, and I don't want to take up too much.
Is he the doctor that came out with he did this whole thing on ADD?
No.
Okay.
No, he has an incredible story. And I think you're going to really, really, he's very spiritual. I think that you and Jon, if Jon doesn't know him, I think you'll both really enjoy listening to his podcast. He's got a wonderful voice and the whole thing. But anyhow, I guess that the point is that, I had a very different relationship with my parents than my siblings. Right. So, and we can really feel shame over it if we compare ourselves and say, well, they were never really that hard on so-and-so or whatever. The same exact event can occur, and I'll have a much different recollection of what happened
all the time
anyone else, right? And we get so caught up in this external validation that we then start to think that if somebody else outside of us doesn't agree with or see things or remember things the same way that we did, that we then have to cancel out our experience, right? Because if somebody else doesn't validate it, then that means it didn't happen, right?
Right.
And especially when we're dealing with like, you know, families like with addiction or alcoholism or, you know, whatever it might be, that's all part of it, right? Is denying somebody else's experience.
Yeah. Yeah. We have all that in my family.
Yeah. So, so I just think it's really interesting that if we can really understand that in every single situation, like you, I mean, that's one of the things that I, like I said, I can't say it enough. I really admire about you is that you really don't look at it from the perspective of a victim. And it is so easy to be a victim.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Poor me. Yeah. Poor me.
Yeah.
And that's not gonna help you. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't, awareness helps,
I mean, there's
assessment.
nothing wrong with mourning that,
Right.
but you do it and then you move on, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're whole.
Uh-huh.
It's you and you can make yourself whole and you can create your own wholeness. And I think that that's probably what I noticed in your book is that you, as much as you had your things that were unhealed and whatever, like you were very comfortable, you know, kind of holding your own space around you. You had this kind of like hula hoop around you, you know, of just like, this is me, you know?
Yeah.
And it just seemed like Jon was always like, well, when are you going to let me in there? Like, how can I get in there? You know,
Yeah.
he's like
Yeah.
trying to dive in and go underneath and whatever. And you're just like, it's mine, you know?
Yeah. That's it. That you're giving me some good things to think about, like good visualizations. That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So that is exactly right. And what Jon says, so there can be extreme chaos all around me. There can be, I mean, all kinds of things. And I can just drop in and I can be just completely oblivious.
Yeah.
Well, where does that come from? I grew up in an alcoholic home that was very violent. And it was very unsettling to me from an early age to witness that. And I learned how to pacify myself or how to make myself feel safe. So it comes from that. But it is interesting. Jon's like, wow. I mean, you can just like, and okay, so there's that. Now, I could say that those things happen to me. And then that's why I have to do what I do. And I could use that negatively. And it could be a negative thing that I do that I check out. Well, no, I don't look at it like that because it also served me. I can tell you that in an emergency situation, in a crisis, something happens where I can drop in and I can see things and I get really uber focused and I can act. So that's a benefit. That is a benefit from the trauma that I experienced growing up.
Yeah.
So there's always a gift in it if you look for it and you use it. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm definitely no stranger to trauma either. And I think I was probably more in that way as well, where I would just kind of like go into this, like, I'm here. Right. I remember, I think I was 8 or around 8 years old, and I got a guided meditation for out of body experiences when I was 8 years old.
Okay, that's amazing.
And
that's
I would lay on the wood floor in front of those big, you know, the speakers, like the bigger the better. In the, you know, I forget, it was like the 70s, I guess. Right. And I would lay in front of the speaker and the music was, I would just put it on so loud and I would just like follow those meditations, because again, it was the same thing of just closing out the chaos.
Yeah.
And I am a highly sensitive person, right? HSP. So I felt everybody's energy and I didn't know how to manage it at that time and whatever. So it was a great way for me to, as we know now, regulate my nervous system.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I get it.
So
Wow.
that was your way of not just disassociating, but also you were using that time to center yourself so that you could then reintegrate yourself back in again. So I think that's important too for everybody who's listening, our community, to understand, because we're all here. And listen, if we're breathing and we're here, we've all experienced trauma at this point. Right?
Exactly. That's it. That is so true.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think it's important for people to know that there are definitely coping skills are fantastic, right? We get to flex the muscle, but we don't want to be a victim of it. We don't want it to be to the point where we have no free will over it, right? Where it's actually decompensating our relationships with ourselves and deteriorating relationships with the world around us and how we see ourselves, and that we're really not living in reality. So there's a big difference. And that's where, your strength was just, from as early back as you've shared, like you've just been very strong that way. And that wasn't something necessarily that, we can thank the trauma for, but I really think it's just who you intrinsically are as well.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with it too. My personality and what I was born into.
Yeah.
But I did want to just throw out also, I did do a lot of work on myself in my 20s with a therapist, and I highly recommended it. It changed my life and it changed my perspective, and really catapulted me into a whole, wonderful path in my life. So, I'm a big proponent of therapy, and getting into those groups. Again, I'm so grateful. I still search for that group. Matter of fact, Sharon, you and I would be in that group together if we were, in the same town, because there is something about getting together physically that I think is, so special. But I have yet to find, having met this one Christian astrologer and his wife, I think they might be close to that, but it's so neat to be able to get together with people and work on, because there's always stuff to work on. I mean, I'm 54, but look, here's something. I'm just gonna throw it out there. I didn't drink, and I didn't drink because I was and I kind of shared a little bit about this with you. But I was a big partier. Remember I moved in with my cocaine dealer boyfriend, and, did all that, and big drinker, and checked myself into a rehab when I was in Nashville, Tennessee at 22. Stayed sober, met my husband, had my children, 12 years, 13 years, moved down to this little neighborhood in Florida. And I was like, well, it's not like I'm going to go get a bag of Coke or take some X. I'm just going to drink this wine with these lovely ladies that live on my block, right? Because it's glamorous. So, I've kind of on and off again with drinking. I know it would serve me to not drink alcohol from a productive place and from a health perspective. So it is something, my husband would love it if I didn't drink. It's so funny when I'll say, oh, well, Jon Gordon's coming, I can't drink. I call him Jon Gordon, by the way. Yeah. And they're like, my girlfriends would be like, well, that's who he married. I go, oh, but no, it's not. It's not who he married. I didn't drink when I met him. So that is something I ended up, okay. So, and I always voice this, like, I'll tell people, like, I know, I've had a love-hate thing with alcohol. I don't drink every night. I don't drink all the time. I would probably say I'm more of a binge drinker if I do it. Like,
Mm.
I may not drink for a while and then go out with girlfriends and those champagnes flowing and then I drink, but I will drink too much, meaning it makes me sick for like the next 5 days. So I ended up listening to this book on tape called The Naked Mind. Have you heard of it?
No.
Mind blown. It blew my mind.
Wow.
And it blew my mind because while I was in AA early in my life, and very, very grateful for AA and the people in AA, I did get to a point for me where I didn't want to keep hearing about all the bad stuff in the meetings. It just got to be too much. And
Heavy. It's very heavy.
Yeah. And so, but wow, I found this, and I found it because my son's doctor recommended it for him because he's going back to college. And, he's like, well, I'm going to drink. And she's like, why? And he's like, well, just because that's what we do. Why? And so I ended up downloading the book. It has absolutely been life-changing. I didn't even download it thinking, well, I don't want to, it just, you start listening to these things and it kind of took it away. Does that mean I'm never going to drink again? I don't really know, but it is the one thing that I struggle with right now that causes me guilt and shame and affects me mentally, physically, and spiritually. So that's the truth. So I don't have all my issues solved. It's basically what I'm telling you.
And I so appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's one of the things that I love about you is that self-care is okay, number one, but you don't live a filtered life.
No. You're saying all the key words. Yeah. I don't have a filter. So much so that sometimes my husband will take me to an event, and before we walk in, he goes, now, honey. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's one of the things that I love about you.
Yeah. And that's what my friends say about me. So thank you.
Yes, totally. But and that's the thing too, that I would say that you and Jon are very similar about too, because looking at what he shares, it's also very unfiltered, right? What you share in the book is very unfiltered. It's just, so I appreciate you sharing that, because I was just having this conversation with a client before we started our podcast. And, one of the things is that, I've done some public speaking this week too. And, we talk a lot about trauma and healing, right? In my spaces and in my circles. And so I was the featured speaker. And so I'm talking about it. And somebody said something along the lines of, something about healing being finite, right? So once you've healed, life is so much better. And I thought I wanted to almost kind of tackle it in the sense of like, yes, because I've been on a healing journey. You've been on a healing journey for years, right? Years and years and years and years. And life is great. It's sometimes you just want to bite the air. It's so good, right? It's just so good, but we're not done. Healing is not crossing a finish line. Healing isn't, oh, well, I did that once and now I won't ever have to reach in and have to work through that again. Healing is about the daily work and application of, like you said, keeping the markers low. Right.
So this is the age-old analogy. And I did go to graduate school to be a psychotherapist. So I admire you for continuing, because I couldn't do it. I thought I loved it until I started counseling in downtown Atlanta in a Baptist mental health hospital. And I'm like, oh, this is heavy. So I quit. So
I didn't know that about you, by the way. So that's cool.
Yeah. So But yeah, it's the analogy of the onion, right? And you're
Right.
always peeling away more layers. And,
Yes.
things just come up at different times in your life. When you get married, you might come up with issues. When you have your first baby, you might, I mean, in different stages bring up different issues or traumas, and then you deal with them. Right. So
Right.
yeah, it's a
You-
lifelong, but live your life and don't be a victim. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Be for me, and I say this a lot. So you've probably heard it. And I know if anybody else has watched my podcast that I've said this a lot. We are here and we will all be much better for it if we live in a way where we are safe, regulated presence. That doesn't mean keep things real small and quiet. But the more that we can be that safe, regulated presence, the more we can be aware of when something is stirring inside of us that we're not comfortable with, or maybe an uncomfortable feeling or pain or whatever it might be. And we can say in that moment, if it's not the right time to unpack it, you can say, I'm going to bookmark that and come back to it, because
Yep.
I love myself enough to know that I am constantly looking to heal and grow. Right. And I am going to make sure that if there's something in there, I'm going to address it.
Sure.
Right. But if we think that, well, oh, I've healed. Right. Oh, I went through my healing journey when I was 22. I went to see a therapist. I'm good now. Right. Then we're going to find ways to numb and squash and deny and elude and all of that for the rest of our lives. Right.
I just got to tell you this because it's so funny. Isn't it funny? Those people, I'm going to say those people. So I play tennis, and there's a girl, she'll never hear your podcast because she doesn't believe in self-help and she doesn't need help. And she's batshit crazy. Excuse me, guys. I mean, she really is. Like, she's known in the tennis realm for this. And so we were doing a foursome, but she's a great tennis player, so people still invite her to play tennis. Mm-hmm. So if someone puts a group together, I'll normally bring one of Jon's books. At the time I didn't have mine out, just, whatever his newest book is. And everybody, of course, is very grateful. Well, I show up this time and I go to hand her the book, and she goes, oh, no. I don't read self-help. I don't need self-help. Yeah, I don't. There's nothing wrong. It's funny. Those are the people. So that's a big red flag. If someone's telling you they don't need help ever, we all need help. We all need help.
We all need help, and we're all here for connection, right? So what she's telling you is that she's not really safe.
Ooh, we're all here for connection. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're all here for connection, and the way that we connect is through in part our energy and our nervous systems, right? So I want to connect with people who are fun and happy and high vibe and all of that, but regulated, know how to keep themselves out of that like triggered, survival, where we're not using the front part of our brain mode. Right.
Right.
So, I like deeper, more intimate kinds of conversations. In order to be able to be intimate, you need to feel comfortable enough with allowing people to see into you. Right. So into me, see, right. Intimacy into me, see. Right. Wow. So basically that woman's saying, oh yeah, no. And by the way, all of the blinds are closed and the front door is locked,
Right. And that's about right. Yeah.
Cannot see into this house,
Yeah.
So, but I'm just so grateful that you came today, and this time has flown by.
I know. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun, Sharon.
Yes, it really has. Well,
I've got to have you on my podcast, and we can continue some more of this talk.
Yeah, well, I look
So,
forward to it for sure. I can't
yeah.
wait for your first episode to drop. It's
Well, okay. And that's what I've been working on. There's a whole behind the scenes thing. I'm going to get it. I was supposed to interview my husband again tonight because that was going to be one of my first releases. And the audio didn't come out. So we got to do it again, but I'll do them tomorrow. I'll have more energy, but
Yeah.
I did want to just tell your listeners, with the book Relationship Grit, you can get a free action plan if you go to relationshipgritbook.com. And it's a great little action plan. You can sit with your partner. Some of the things are, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I communicate and what would make it a 10? Some action plans. Yeah. And you can reach me or find me at Kathryn Gordon on Instagram. I just got my website up, kathrynforreal.com.
I love
Yeah. So email is right now is kathryn.gordon@comcast.net. Yep.
it. I love it. And I cannot wait to see and hear more of you in your podcast. People are going to love, love, love your discussions. And
Thank you.
and I can't wait to hear your conversation with Jon, because I've just really grown to love his mind and love your connection and your chemistry together, and all that you share, and the way that you just guide us to really be faithful, and to of course always focus on yourself, but look outside yourself to help to
Right.
serve the other, right?
To serve,
and
to
to
serve.
serve. So
Yep.
it's I'm just so excited that just incredible things are coming, and you're delivering for sure. So
Thank
so
you,
grateful.
Sharon. Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank you.
much.
Yes.
All right.
Once again, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. And until the next time, peace, love.
Take
and-
care.
All right.